Hey everyone, Khalil here, and welcome to the start of another vlog. In this one, I'm going to be talking about the books that I'm reading for the Booktube Prize. Now, the Booktube Prize is a community-led prize that is hosted by Barter Hordes. I will link the channel down below, and I will also link the official channel for the Booktube Prize itself down below as well. Now, I first took part in this one 2 years ago, I believe. At that point in time, the prize was running its second year, and they had two categories: general fiction and nonfiction. And at this point in time, this year, a new category was added, which is translated fiction. And because of that, I signed up to be a judge for the Booktube Prize. I was not intending to judge until like August or something like that, so until the final round, because of my Project C or TBR. But before the start of this month, we got an email saying that there weren't enough judges signed up for this round, and so I did last minute sign up. So it's not ideal for me in terms of getting my Project C or TBR under wraps before July, but we'll do our best. So for this round, I have to read 6 books. I will have a video out which goes through all 6 and their premises, and I will link that one up above. But for this particular session, I'm only going to be reading 3, and then I'll have another video go up, or maybe 4, and then I'll have another video with the remaining 2, and then my final thoughts on the entire selection. So first book that I'm going to be reading is The Membranes by Chi Ta Wei. I was very lucky to have this on my selection because, first of all, it's a short one, but it's also one that I've really been excited about because the channel Books and Bow has really spoken highly about this novel. It is a queer classic. It is sci-fi because it is basically sort of like ecological novel as well. How are we calling that now? Climate fiction, or there's some sort of a name for it, and it's way more catchy than what I just came up with. But so humanity has had to go underground. We are living under the ocean because of the fact that, you know, the ozone layer has disappeared because of climate change and things like that. So that is the setting for our novel. I don't know too much more about what's going to unfurl within this novel. We have a protagonist who's very much, you know, isolated. She's very much just living her own life, and she kind of keeps people at a distance. She's been estranged from her mother for over 20 years, and her mother is now finally reaching out, most likely due to some comments she has made in a recent interview. Now, I'm very eager to see where the queer aspect is going to come into this story, but I've really enjoyed the novel so far already, and I really enjoyed, you know, the world building aspect to it as well, the way in which it manages to. And I really enjoyed the world building aspect to it as well. It has just gone over like a full section about, you know, the developments that have taken place since the world was the way that we know our world to be in. And, you know, the way in which living under seas has impacted their lives, but also the way in which the whole idea of power dynamics between nations, that sort of like battle of nations for dominance, for power, has definitely stayed the same in spite of having to relocate to an entire new setting. And so I'm really enjoying that one so far, and so I'll talk to you guys later when I'm a little bit further into it. All right, so I am actually pretty close to finishing The Membranes. So I am like 3/4 of the way in, and I really cannot say too much more about what this book is about. Partly in the way that it's told, because you kind of start off from when she's like 30 or about to turn 30, and she's setting up this meeting with her mother, who she has indicated she hasn't seen in 20 years. And then you kind of go back, you take a step back, and you kind of see, like, you kind of go back to a time in her life when she was 10 years old and she was being prepared for this big surgery, and like she couldn't be in touch with anybody, so there was just like this one friend that she was in a super close contact with called Andy. And I'm really not going to go into more, but it's super fascinating. So the world building in itself is fascinating. So we're looking at a world that has been ravaged by climate change, and so people are living in these sort of like domes underneath the sea. So that aspect is interesting, and especially in terms of the way in which it's described. The title, The Membranes, is being used on multiple levels throughout this book. She will be applying some sort of ointment as if it's an extra membrane paint that she's applying to people's skin. She describes the ocean as a membrane over the world that they're living in at some point in time. And so there's a lot of play on the membrane. And so we use that language a lot. And there's another sort of like symbol that also comes back a lot of times, which is a canary. And we kind of explore different levels to that as well. And aside from this whole idea of them living underground, there's also the aspect of there being technological advances. You know, we are 2100 in the future. We are the year 2100, so of course a lot of technological advances have also taken place. And so in the society you have androids, but you also have cyborgs, and there's this idea of creating cyborgs that, you know, like perfectly match certain people in order for them to then be able to harness their organs at some point in time whenever they need to, so that they don't need to like wait for a donor to match. You know, they create a donor for themselves basically. And where the story takes that concept is super interesting, and I did not see that coming. You know, there were times in which I saw things coming, and I would always see them like very, like some things I saw early on, some things I saw like right before they were being revealed, but there's always another layer basically, because the reveal that we've just gotten, there's no way that I would have known that, and I'm very eager to see how this is gonna wrap up now. But so far, absolutely 5 stars. All right, looks like nothing has happened in the meantime, but I finished the Membranes, right? Membranes, plural, yeah. Membranes by Chitawe. Actually, it's a lot shorter than I thought it was, because like there's a, I don't know, 30-page essay or something at the end talking about the Taiwan of the time in which this book was written and published, talking about the impact of this book, talking about the themes within this book, talking about the author and things like that. So I would highly encourage you to also read it if you're gonna read the Membranes, because I think it added like some extra layers to my understanding of the book. And you know, it was just nice to see somebody describe, like put into better words than I can, the experience of reading this book. Yeah, I absolutely love this one. I mean, at this point in time I cannot see how any of the other books are gonna top that, but who knows. I will still give them the opportunity to surprise me, of course. So it is like the final day and a couple of hours in the month of April, but of course I'm still trying to fit in another book, and so I've started to read Khalil by Yasmina Khadra. That pronunciation could be wrong. I'm always a little bit confused about how to pronounce the KH. But so this is the next book for the Booktube Prize, and I found it to be really fascinating. I mean, that's the reason why I'm picking it up next as well, also because it is the shortest one that I have left. But this is a book that takes place in Paris, or it starts off in Paris. We are following our protagonist, who is this young guy who grew up in Molenbeek in Belgium, and he has gotten involved in sort of like radicalized Islam groups, and he's on his way to Paris with a suicide vest attached to him. So he, along with 3 others, are let loose at the Stade de France in order to, you know, commit suicide with a vest in this public occasion and, you know, create havoc in the city of Paris. And when he is trying to detonate his vest, it turns out that his vest does not work. So fascinating concept, and so far also the language really appeals to me as well. I think it's really compellingly written. Like, I'm a quarter of the way in at this point in time, so I definitely do still have a ways to go. I mean, it's an under 200-page book, so it's definitely not a long one, but if he has more of these works with these interesting premises, then I definitely want to read more. So it's Saturday and I am like 75% or so into it, and I don't think I updated you guys again yesterday when like things clicked in my head, but like based on the names that they were saying for the terrorist attack, it all of a sudden became clear that they are talking about a real terrorist attack. So in November 2015, there was an attack on the Stade de France in Paris, and then there was also an attack on the Bataclan, which was a concert hall. And so basically the Bataclan, the Stade de France didn't really necessarily ring a bell, but when they started mentioning the Bataclan, that's when I realized that the story is centered around real life terrorist attacks, though the people that we are seeing within this novel and our protagonists, they are made up or they're like fictionalizations. But as far as I'm aware, at least there wasn't anybody who as far as I'm aware, at least, this sort of idea of somebody who was there and who should have detonated but who was unable to detonate, as far as I'm aware, that is not real, or at least I don't find anything about that online neither. But so it is definitely good to know that this isn't like, I saw somebody review it saying like, I went into this expecting this to be a book about somebody who has been given like a second chance in life and him, taking that chance. And that's definitely not really where this book is going. It's definitely not going in the direction of he has seen the light and now he wants to rectify past mistakes or something like that. It's very much a look into the mind of somebody who was willing to do that, somebody who was about to do that. And it's interesting to see him go back to his own environment and have conversations with people around him where he's hiding what he almost did, but they now know what his childhood friend has done. And so seeing their reactions to that and his reaction to their reaction, because they are very much condemning, as does the whole world, what his childhood friend has done, and he then kind of has to swallow his thoughts about them because he was about to do that. So it's very interesting so far, and at this point in time he seems to be about ready to give it another go, to go on another suicide mission. All right, I finished it. So I don't know, like, I definitely thought it was a very interesting read, and I definitely think the premise is amazing and that there are very important and interesting conversations going on, but there are just these moments in which it was kind of losing my attention that make for me to be like hesitant now about what my opinion is about it, because definitely at times I was just like, okay, I'm losing interest basically. And the ending I thought was interesting in the sense that I'm interpreting it in one way, but I'm also still not entirely sure whether that is what happened. So I'm guessing it's a type of ending where you can debate what has actually happened at the end, which I like. I like those types of dubious endings. It's like the ending of The Handmaid's Tale, which apparently a lot of people were like indignant about because it's open and you don't know. There are like one of two things that can happen, and it's like unclear which one of the two has happened. So this is basically the sort of like same deal in that sense. But so I definitely did enjoy it, and I definitely thought it was interesting to move into the mind of somebody who has been radicalized. And so he's very much showing that this area isn't an area full of terrorists. It's not a place where he can just like openly come out and say like, hey, I was part of the terrorist attacks in Paris, and be celebrated by everybody around him. He definitely needs to keep things under a wrap, keep things secret, and not just for fear of betrayal, but also just because he knows how people will react around him, and because the people who have seen these events take place definitely reacts in a very condemning way to his actions, that even though they don't know that it were his actions. And so that I definitely also think is an important message to put out there. A lot of times the negative and these sort of like extremist right figures in our society are trying to say that one bad element is an example of all people of that ethnicity, all people of that specific identity. And that's definitely not the case. And so I definitely like that he portrays that within his book as well, that he portrays the fact that Molenbeek is not this area full of terrorists. It's an area full of regular people who, yes, there are a lot of people there who have had society turned their back on them, but that doesn't mean that all of them have ended up trying to get their revenge on society. Most of them are just regular people going about their regular lives, trying to get a better circumstance in life, or just being content in the way that they're living life right now. It doesn't automatically mean that, youth within that area is automatically going to end up being radicalized neither. So there are interesting thematics running through this one, interesting conversations going through this one as well. But as I said, like at times it was just kind of losing me. And so I definitely enjoyed this one, but when I need to compare the two, because at the end of the ride, I'm gonna have to put like a ranking between these books. And so at the end of this, so at this point in time, I would say The Membranes is definitely gonna score higher for me than Khalil, just because The Membranes really blew me away, and Khalil had the potential but then didn't fully land it. Hey guys, so I'm on to my third book for the Booktube Prize. So I'm reading Gerta by Katarina Tuchova, I believe. Could be a little bit wrong about that name. But so this is a World War II novel set in Czechoslovakia, and so we follow our protagonist, who's this young girl, or like I don't know how young she is, but she's like a girl still during the time of World War II, while World War II is still going on, and she's living in a family that is like a combination of a Czechoslovakian mother and a German father, and so her parents are kind of divided about this war to some extent. We never really have an openly discussion between the parents, or we never hear her mother openly criticize Hitler, for example, but her mother definitely is very much more in favor of being, open towards people around him, and, very much open towards her Czech roots, and very much against the idea of her Czech roots being worthless, whereas her father has become enamored to some extent with Hitler's rhetoric, and so throughout the war he has become more and more the sort of like, stereotypical image we have of Hitler's followers. So he very much wants everybody in the household to speak German, for example. His children have to go to a German school. They have to enlist in like Hitler Youth and stuff like that. However, when the war ends and Czechoslovakia is, freed by the Allied forces, we see the tide completely shifts on Gerta's life. And so all of a sudden, her German heritage, the fact that she is half German, means that she's ousted out of this country. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm absolutely struggling with this one. I will say the first section, the World War II section itself, I really quite enjoyed. I really liked that section. I thought that the dynamics of her being a child and the sort of like tension simmering within the household, I thought those sections were really interesting and were really captivating. However, once we got to the section where they have been released, where the Allied forces have come in and have taken over and have liberated Czechoslovakia, and we see the shift towards them being exiled, then I start to enjoy it less. And I think, first off, part of the reason for that is repetition. In that section, I feel like there's quite a lot of repetition of the fact that, it's hypocritical for them to do that, for them to just put everybody with German roots out of the city without paying attention to whether or not they were actually supporters of the regime or not. And I feel like that is repeated over and over again, and like, I find that a very valid point, and that's a whole reason why this is a very interesting perspective and an interesting premise. However, in the execution, I started to feel like it was just taking too much time to drive the point home, to the extent of having a lesser impact. And then for some reason as well, from that point onward, almost I feel like something in the narrative tone creates a distance between me and the story. I don't know whether there's really a distance there, but in any case, there are like atrocities happening, and I'm not necessarily feeling much of the impact of those. And I kind of more feel like this is now just an enumeration of horrible events taking place rather than a compelling narrative. So at this point in time, I'm really kind of losing my interest with it. I'm definitely going to push through because of the fact that I'm reading this for the Booktube Prize, and in order to be able to fully judge these books and the relative ranking of these books against one another, I do feel like I need to completely finish it, but it's a struggle, I can tell you. Hey guys, so I am about like almost 80% into the book, so I thought should probably update you guys on it. But so this book really is kind of mixed bag for me. So like basically it now turns out that this book consists of like 5 parts, and like between each part there's like a time jump, which doesn't mean that we don't circle back to the past in later parts, because a lot of times there are also like memories of how things had been before, and so we do always still like kind of circle back to the time before the war started, during the war, and all of those things, even if the story that we're following has moved on from that point in time. Part 2 has been my least favorite part so far. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that the same problems that I had with part 2, I'm still having with part 3, just a little bit less, because part 2 was very much focused on the way that the Germans were treated after the Czech citizens were liberated by the Allied forces. And my main problem with that is the fact that I feel like the author is really pushing an interpretation, or she's really pushing her message out there, and her message is a message that I think everybody who has empathy and who's reading that book can discern for themselves, the way that these people have been treated, and any reader would understand that, or like most readers, I'm hoping, would definitely emphasize and would definitely feel like it's wrong the way that they have been treated at that point in time. And I feel like there's just so much emphasis put on how wrong it is that the author's kind of pushing that message rather than just letting the message speak for itself. And so that's my main qualm with it. Aside from that, the way that it's told also doesn't really work that well for me, because so for the first 200 pages or so, we're always following the same character, and then from then onwards, occasionally we will have another character perspective settle in. And I actually like the other characters' perspectives. That's not my main problem with it. My problem with it is that it just gives a little bit of chaos to the text, because we've been following this one perspective for such a long time, and all of a sudden a new perspective comes in. It takes you a few seconds to realize, like, oh wait, this is not the perspective that we've always been reading about. And then we also only read from their perspective for like one chapter. So that also makes it makes it a little bit unclear why we're seeing those perspectives. It's just to give a little bit more of insight on a certain period of time in Gerta's life, I'm guessing, but it just seems a little bit random in that sense. And so execution-wise, I don't think that it's the strongest out there. So I have definitely like settled in now with this book. I was kind of struggling during part 2. I was kind of being like, oh, I have to finish this book for the Booktube Prize and I don't wanna. At this point in time, it's not like I'm gaining a whole lot out of it, but I'm also like I'm not dragging my feet with it neither. What I'm listening to, I'm enjoying enough to continue at this point in time. And as I said, I'm almost there. So I definitely think, unless something earth-shattering is going to happen in this final 20%, it's definitely going to be my least favorite one of the ones that I've read so far, but let's just give it those final 20% to figure that out. Hey guys, so I finished Gerta yesterday and my conclusions remain the same, so it is my least favorite ones of the 3 that I've read so far. However, I will say that I definitely kind of thought it was a interesting ending. It was a very, very depressing ending, to say that. And I actually kind of like the fact that a lot of things that we as a reader know, nobody else ever finds out. So there's a lot of secrets being kept and a lot of resentments between people that you as a reader can kind of more easily understand where that person was coming from because you have the entire background. So I thought that was interesting. It's not very satisfactory as a reader because you're kind of like, yeah, but this person, it wasn't the way that you think it was done like this or whatever. So I did think that that was very well handled. And overall, as I said, I think it's an interesting page in history. It's just that it didn't come together for me, and the way that it was written didn't fully work for me. I just didn't enjoy the way that we were playing with perspectives. I guess if we had started out with like 4 different perspectives and followed those 4 throughout, and thus had gotten 4 different kind of stories that would have gone into all of the different details that we see later on, then I would have enjoyed it more than starting out with one perspective and then later having these intermissions in which other perspectives were also coming in. But so, yeah, I'm going to be ending the vlog here. I'm very eager to see what I'm going to be thinking about the next 3 books that I'm reading for this project, and I'm actually going to be starting one right now. But so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you guys for the next one. Bye!